with student loans, President Biden gets up there and said, this is a mistake. This goes against the Constitution where it says all men are created equal and are endowed by the Creator to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's not in the Constitution. That's in the Declaration of Independence. So if we are concerned when the National Educational Assessment came out and showed that only 13% of eighth graders are proficient at in history and civics, when we have our own president doesn't know the difference between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, we got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as we celebrate the 4th of July tomorrow, we got elected officials even right now don't understand their own duties as congressional representatives and as senators. So this is where we're at. So going back earlier, so in 1787, they established the U.S. Constitution. A couple of years later, it was ratified. Finally, in 1789, it was ratified, and we move on. First president was George Washington.
So what does it mean for you to be, American, especially here during the 4th of July? You're a Marine veteran, so am I.
Correct.
So I think we kind of look at this day a little bit differently.
We do
than most.
We're veterans. We've served, and both of us served in combat. You were wounded. I wasn't, but I went to over 45 different funerals for Marines and soldiers who were killed.
Well, and I don't think people understand we live in a country where we have more freedoms than most here around here. I'm not saying like we are the freest country when it comes to other countries, especially we have a lot of people that are very, very critical of this country that can say bad things about this country and still live in the luxury of the freedoms that is.
I agree.
Because would this happen in any other country where you can berate or even talk bad about your country and not have some kind of repercussion?
Here's the difference between this country and many other countries around the world. Other countries have freedom.
Mm-hmm.
America has freedom. America's not perfect. I'm never going to say America's a perfect country. We had slavery, the way we treated the American Indians, the way we treated the Chinese, the Japanese, Irish, Italians, whoever. America's not perfect. But what Abraham Lincoln once kind of stated is America is an evolving country, meaning we're evolving to better ourselves, to go back to the ideas that were found in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. When Abraham Lincoln debated Stephen Douglas in 1858, and the primary issue was slavery, he said that Thomas Jefferson was a great man, but he was flawed. He pushed the pursuit, all men are created equal, but he owned slaves. And what he said is, when he debated Stephen Douglas, who wanted let the popular sovereignty, let the people make that decision, but what he was overtly saying is, he used the Bible, and the Bible said we're all equal under God's eyes, and if the Declaration of Independence stated that all men are created equal, how can some men be free and others be enslaved?
Mm-hmm.
So that set the motion for this. But we're not a perfect country, but here's the point. Let's say Europe. If your family went to college, you have a greater chance to go to college. In America, so if your parents did not go to college, you're more than likely, chances of going to college are slim. You go to some Asian countries like Japan. If you start a business and your business fails, that's it. That means you lost your honor. In America, you start a business, it fails. You start a business, it fails. You may go 3 or 4 businesses and it fails, but you finally get that one. And if you look at history, like when all the great titans got started and
mm-hmm.
all the companies, they failed at so many things until they got it.
Yeah.
But their perseverance, we set the motion for small businesses to succeed. We don't have a hierarchy. I mean, unless you look at Congress and the Senate, but we don't have a hierarchy. We don't have an elite, an aristocratic elites. Like we don't have kings and queens like you do a monarchy.
Okay.
We don't have
the sheikhs and everything like that. That would be a aristocratic.
Yeah, an aristocrat. We don't have a monarchy where, let's say, I mean, nothing against the royal family in England, But what makes Prince Harry, what's it, Harry, or Prince or King Charles, or or Prince William? What makes them different from somebody else just because they were born into a family? In America, people are born into wealthy families all the time.
Yeah.
But you're not deprived of a position because you were born into a poor family. I was born poor.
Yeah.
We had to give money to our parents because they didn't have the money for us to do things.
That's kind of crazy to me too. That, I mean, I've heard about it. I even maybe like seen things on like TV where, yeah, the family's chipping in, but to know somebody that used to go out to work and then fork over their money.
That's what we had to do if we wanted to survive.
Yeah.
But we're not denied the opportunities because we were poor. I got a bachelor's degree. I got a master's degree. My dad only had a 5th grade education.
Yeah.
My younger brother runs a superintendent for a construction company. I have another brother who was a captain, is now retired in the fire department. So we're not, in America, you're not stepped down because of that. Now, everybody could fault and go back to the Supreme Court ruling on discrimination. What they used is the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause.
But we've actually talked about this, especially on this podcast. Even so, like, here's a shocker. I'm white. My son's white. But if him, he being white, and then there was an African American and a Hispanic kid, and we weren't up to grade level or proficiency, or if the proficiency or the grade level wasn't up to par for them to move it to the 2nd grade, the only person that would get held back is the white kid. Because they think that they're doing them some great service of moving them up. And,
they're harming students.
Yeah, they're harming. But then is there something like maybe they're making it seem like they're doing something, but they're doing it for the betterment of.
They're actually harming kids. I mean, the National Educational Assessment that came out showed that 92% of 13-year-old African American children are not proficient at math. So you want to provide opportunities. You're never going to have the same outcome on anything. You're just never. I mean, I wanted to be an economist, but because I'm severely dyslexic, math just throws me off. I just cannot do numbers. And you'll see that when we do our business plan. But I mean, I just can't do numbers. So am I supposed to get promoted just because I have a deficiency? I just realized I'm not as good as somebody else who's better in math.
But also maybe
you choose something else that you're better at.
Okay, but back in the day, since you were an Italian American kid, and that was kind of, and then, back in whenever you were born, I think it was like the 40s or 50s.
Yeah, that's probably thanks.
When you're going through school, this hearing or this equal opportunity that they were trying to push through, you would have benefited too, and you're white as a ghost.
Exactly, but I mean, getting back to the original premise, I worked at when my business didn't exactly take off as fast, and then COVID came along. I was forced to work I'll admit it, I was forced to work at a fast food restaurant.
Tell them what the fast food, come on.
I worked at Chick-fil-A, and I busted my butt. I was never late. I was always on time. I went there, I hate to say this, sick twice.
He walked 8 miles
when my truck was broke down.
8 miles. So
I walked 8 miles. This is literally walked 8 miles. That's not me floating this like your parents walked 20 miles in the snow. No. I walked 8 miles and then worked 11-hour day on my feet.
I almost called you an Uber. That's how I was like, I need to pick this guy up.
That was my responsibility. But when I was there, we had individuals the kitchen manager was from Ecuador. We had people from Mexico, Puerto Rico, Cuba. There was a couple Cubans, and then we had one girl from Venezuela. And every one of them, especially I used to talk to the kitchen manager a lot, and he even said, I don't get you Americans. You guys want to embrace socialism. America is like the land of opportunity because I did not have this in my country. The one guy from Cuba,
Mm-hmm.
he was a little bit more edgier, saying, "I don't get you guys."
You could say that some of the most American people are the immigrants that came over
because
here
they've seen
properly.
what America was like. There was I work at a law enforcement supply company,
Not a cop.
not a cop, and across the street is, I think it's a mobile station if I remember right, and we always go there to get, I get my protein drink, but I talked to the guy who's an Indian and American. He coming from the country India, and we talk a little bit about this, and he doesn't understand America. He really doesn't. And what I mean by that is, he goes, "You have so much opportunity here." And when we talk about, when people say they're being oppressed, he goes, "Oppression? You need to go to my country when it comes to poverty."
Pakistan or India?
India.
Okay.
You go to my country and talk about poverty. Americans think they're poor. Everybody can get access to basic health care, basic shelter, health care, because we have programs. There's Medicare, Medi-Cal, there's food stamps, there's welfare, there's all these benefits. You're poor in other countries, that's it. You're poor. There was places in the Philippines when I was at. People were born on dumps.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they born, raised, lived, grew up, and died.
Well, it's kind of like the caste system too. Like
Yeah,
if they were
they have a
born, if they were
caste
born
system.
in, yeah.
We don't have that. Now, we can look back at our history, how United States treated, ethnic minorities, especially blacks, obviously. But we've evolved since then. And if you go back to the writings and the teachings of Martin Luther King, when he said, "Then I have a dream" speech, and I'll paraphrase it, that he wanted to be judged on his content, not the color of his skin, on his character.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got individuals who twisted that around, and like the whole affirmative action being overturned. What makes this student or this person different, let's say an Asian student? And there was a student here in Florida, scored a 1595 on his SAT, but was denied entrance into the Ivy League school. But if that would have flipped, and then let's say the person would have put down a black or Hispanic, they would have gotten in.
Mm-hmm.
So, but from the overall totality, we can challenge our elected officials.
Is that just like the universities virtue signaling, like, "Oh, we will accept you" and stuff like that, or "We will do"?
They will, but they're also harming students. You're bringing in people, and this is what I'm writing an article about the achievement gap. They're harming students by saying, like in Oregon, "Oh, the way to fix why a lot of minority students can't pass the math and English and other tests to graduate high school, let's just eliminate it."
Mm-hmm.
When California passes, we're not going to have anybody take SAT scores to get into colleges.
Same with Oregon, right?
Yeah, and that's a way to help minority. And all it does
But is that for everybody? Like everybody?
everybody,
Okay.
because they feel that not enough minorities are getting into these schools. But instead of looking at why, like even Barack Obama and Michelle Obama and the NAACPs were talking about this as a racist decision by eliminating the affirmative actions because it's going to harm minority students. But they came from Chicago. Chicago has 80% of black children can't do math or English to grade level. But they're all against choice for students or for families, but they had choice to send their two girls to go to private school their whole life. And one of the first official acts that he did as president in 2009 was to end a scholarship program that sent minority students out of the failing DC schools to private schools that his daughters attend. But going back to the original premise, here in America, we can find out, let's say like campaign donations. That's all public record.
Mm-hmm.
We can find out this stuff. We have something called the Freedom of Information Act. We can find out what our government's doing or not doing. We have the resources. And then just look at it. On another note, if America is so bad, why do millions of people travel from Central America, Venezuela, Cuba?
Well, but I don't think it's those people that that don't like America. I think we have like this majority here in the country that are already here that hate America, But the reason why they hate America is because they have the freedom to say they hate
Yeah, they
America.
have the freedom to do that. And you listen to these people, like, if you don't like this country, nobody's coming in to arrest you if you hate America.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming.
You could talk bad about our president. You could talk
well,
about
you
anybody.
can burn the American flag, and even Anton Scalia, one of the most conservative members of the court until he passed away in 2016, he even said, I'm against flag burning, but in a Scalia world, that would be banned. But he voted in favor of free speech to support someone's right to burn the American flag.
But also, like you and I, we fought for this country. You know, we fought for America, and there could be somebody doing the same thing, and the only thing we could do is just we can take a little bit of pride in ourselves, knowing that the things that we did are giving them the freedoms to do what they're doing.
But then also, if you look at history, and people look at our history, after World War II, think about this. After the end of the Second World War, America was all over Europe, all over Asia. Half of all shipping in the world was American. And America had the only country until 1949 when Russia acquired the atomic bomb. What did America do after the end of the Second World War? It demilitarized its military, decommissioned everything, and it also instituted a Marshall Plan to help rebuild not only our allies, but our enemies of Germany and Japan, and now they're two of our staunchest allies. And we had the atomic bomb. Now flip the switch. What happens if Russia had 50% of all shipping was Russian? They had the atomic bomb, the only country that had the atomic bomb. How would they have used it? Look what China does. Many of our business leaders are really kowtowing to China. Do you think China would be open about a lot of things it's doing? Do you think China would be open about what its government's doing? Look at the Wuhan the coronavirus. We're now finding out the more plausible scenario that it originated in a lab. This was coming from the FBI and the Department of Energy, because the Department of Energy oversees the nation's laboratories. Now we're finding out, which you would never find this out in other countries. The General Accounting Office is stating that the National Institute of Health, which Dr. Fauci runs, was funding the Wuhan laboratory for the coronavirus. Where other countries would you be able to find that out?
Well, I mean, and we're still it's like slowly leaking. I think more will come out if there's a different president.
But I mean, we're not perfect. Our government is not perfect. Our elected leaders are not perfect. But we have the freedoms that no other country has. You have a chance that anybody can go to college. I went to a junior college, then I went to a state college, and then I went and got my master's at an online military university. You can be dirt poor and still go to a university. Other countries, you're not doing that.
Yeah.
Look at our elected officials. We have people elected to office, whether Democrat or Republicans, from all different backgrounds. In many countries, in many Western countries, if you are not part of that ruling elite, whether on both sides, you're not running for public office. You're not even going to obtain that. Now, as much as they call this a racist, systemically racist country, how did Barack Obama become president when blacks make up only 14% of the U.S. population? If every African American voted for Barack Obama, he still would have lost in a landslide.
Or Tim Scott.
Or Tim Scott.
Or Ben Carson.
Or all these individuals. Or Byron Donaldson, the congressman from Florida. Or Nikki Haley, the former governor and UN ambassador from South Carolina.
Yeah, not to mention, we have plenty of black police chiefs, fire chiefs,
mayors.
We have a bunch of
There's a black mayor of Baltimore.
You know what?
There's a black mayor of Chicago.
I don't know if this
black mayor of Los Angeles.
I don't know if this is kind of podcast I want to bring it up on, but who knew that the mayor of Miami was a Republican?
Yeah, Mayor Suarez.
Was he?
He's Cuban. He's really revitalized. He's running for president.
Well, he's running for president, but did you know that he was a Republican? All right. I mean, I did not know until I'm like,
Well, but look at the Republican ticket. You have an Indian American, you have an African American, you have a Cuban American, you have diversity of on that running for president on both sides. Even in 2000, or then you have like Tim Scott. You have this. That wouldn't happen. A Barack Obama would never be elected president in any of the Western countries.
mm-hmm. But did the Obama presidency kind of ruin it for future candidates?
No, I think what he did is people would look at. No, I mean, people. That's the problem. People look at it as a race thing. I don't see it as a race thing. I just think it was Barack Obama, not because he was African American.
Mm-hmm.
I could listen to Tim Scott. I like some of his principles. I think he would make a good president.
But didn't his predecessor do more for Black Americans than he himself?
Well, the record shows that. I hate to say this to people, and they may disagree, that Donald Trump did more for Black America than Barack Obama did.
And just recently found out that he, out of all the living presidents, didn't own slaves.
Didn't own slaves. Even Barack Obama owned slaves through his mother. So you've got all these issues that are that this shows the beauty of America. And again, America is an evolving country, and it just gets better each time.
You got something?
No, they said it looks like they said some comments in this live were filtered to protect the community experience. So I haven't seen any posts yet. But
I wonder what we're saying.
yeah, but I mean, we're not perfect, but this is still far the best country in the world.
Yeah.
And here's an example that I used on the radio show. My father fought in the Italian Navy during World War II,
Mm-hmm.
fought against the United States. He was welcomed into America, and he raised a family. 3 of his 4 sons served in the military.
Yeah.
So if America is such a we even welcome our enemies who are former enemies and now are our friends.
Not to mention that your dad may have witnessed the conception of the Pearl Harbor bombing.
Yeah, well, what Joe is referencing, that my dad was in the Italian Navy and he was at the Battle of Taranto, which is at the boot of Italy. And what that was in 1940, British dive bombers bombed the Italian fleet, and they just sunk a couple ships. And the harbor there is a shallow harbor. So the British modified their torpedoes to reflect the conditions of the harbor. Well, my dad had pictures, and he threw them away. I wanted to slap him. But he had pictures of the Japanese admirals coming to his ship in 1940 to check it out. And it's ironic, in 1941, December 7th, Pearl Harbor, the Japanese had to modify their torpedoes because of the shallow harbor that was Pearl Harbor, because at the time the torpedoes went below, I think, 25 or 30 feet. So they had to modify it to make reflected at 15 feet.
Yeah.
So you learn things every day. And then my dad fought against Prince Philip, who died I think 2 years ago, because they were in the same battle off the island, off Greece and Crete.
Yeah. And
So-
welcome to America with open arms.
Welcomed open arms and embraced it. And he had children. 3 of his 4 sons went into the military. All 3 served in combat. One brother was in the Persian Gulf War. My older brother was in Grenada and Lebanon with the Navy, and I served 3 combat tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan.
And you were who with what? Who were you with?
I was with
The Marines.
I was in the Marines. So
That's why you're the best.
that's why I was always the best. But this country is, and I just look at all the immigrants. I would just tell people this: if you may disagree with everything I said, ask any immigrant what they think of America and what their country, especially those who come from Cuba or Venezuela or some of these authoritative countries. Ask them. And there you go. We got millions flowing this way. I do not see millions going to China, Russia, any of the European countries or anything like that. But they come to America because they like that opportunity.
I'm going to the Virgin Islands.
There you go.
All right, John, how can you get a hold of us?
You can get a hold of us by going to ubaldireports@gmail.com. That's ubaldireports@gmail.com. You can check us out on all the social media platforms. You can check us out on the podcast on all the podcast streaming sites. So keep following Ubaldi Reports. The goal is to do this 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, because there's a lot to talk about. But I just wanted to do a 4th of July message and wish everybody a happy 4th of July.
All right.
And then Joe will tell us about the podcast that he's a part of.
Just stay tuned for All American Gunslingers. We'll have some more podcasts out shortly. We're actually starting up our own business along with the website. So just stay tuned for that. And as soon as it's up, we will be promoting it on Ubaldi Reports.
Yeah, and so keep following Ubaldi Reports. Let your friends and family know. And by not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, we're going to be back at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. That's every Wednesday at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time starting next week. So stay tuned.